Hello and welcome to another episode of Imperial Cantina, where we sit down with a guest, have some drinks, and talk about Star Wars one movie at a time. I'm here with my co-host, Jackson Daly. And Jackson, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Braydon?
I'm good. And today we have a very special guest, a filmmaker and the host of the Top 500 podcast, Jake McGruder. Jake, how are you doing?
I honestly couldn't be better, and I have one question for you boys.
Oh, no.
The Wanawanga? No, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
Taco to Jabba now. So, yeah, Jake is a filmmaker, as a lot of the people in our space are. But kind of, what have you been up to just recently when it comes to Star Wars? Like, what have you been watching? What have you been reading? What have you been playing?
Oh, man, not as much. I really feel, for me, the big one, because I know you guys, in the early episodes of the show, you guys said you were feeling like a rewatch of the movie franchise coming. For me, the big one I always just feel kind of bubbling at the bottom of my stomach is Clone Wars rewatch. So I feel like that's going to come any day now. But really, I mean, Mando. I was keeping up with Mando, as many were. And then I always kind of find my way back to Timothy Zahn stuff, even the newer stuff. So I have Thrawn kind of around the house just for when I want to pick it up and check it out. But I wish more. Have
you read the new Thrawn trilogy?
Yes, yeah, of course.
I have not. I need to.
Oh my goodness.
I have it set up, but I haven't read any Thrawn.
So a little anecdote, and this was a hero moment for me. I went to Celebration, and I'm sure that was going to come up at some point later, but I went to Celebration in 19 in Chicago, and I got to meet Timothy Zahn, and I have like autographed copies, and I talked to him about writing, and he gave me a little piece of wisdom for writing, and
awesome.
He's like a hero. I think him and Filoni are like right here for me. But when it comes to like Star Wars literature and Star Wars novels, I think my go-to author is Claudia Gray. She just writes some of my favorite Star Wars stuff. I think
Chuck
Jackson.
Wendig.
I like Chuck Wendig.
I like Chuck Wendig. Yeah, I started reading more of Aftermath, and I like Chuck Wendig.
He has a very different style of writing. He writes in the present tense.
I agree. And I like that because it keeps you in this instant form where you can't really guess whatever is going to happen. It's never like this foreshadowing of anything. Everything's just right in front of you.
I'm trying to remember because I was keeping up when the big shift, when the Disney purchase happened and then they reset the canon and all that. Do you remember what the first official book that they put out was?
It was Tarkin. Hey guys, it's Braydon. Got to interrupt the show for a second because I said Tarkin, but that was not the first canon novel. It actually came out 2 months or so after A New Dawn, the Rebels novel with Kanan and Hera. So just so everybody knows, New Dawn was the first canon novel. Okay, back to the show.
It was Tarkin.
The Tarkin novel.
I read Tarkin, and I remember, because at that point, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about this in a second, but I was in on Star Wars. Every piece of content I was getting day one, and so I read that
because
one.
You're looking for little Easter eggs for episode 7.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have to keep up what they're dropping for 7. Timothy Zahn's my guy. Really, Timothy Zahn's been my guy, and Thrawn's just anything Thrawn I'm eating up. So
awesome. Jackson, how about you? What have you been doing in the past 2 days that we haven't talked?
I watched Return of the Jedi. What have I? I haven't touched any more of Galaxy of Heroes. I don't even know if I've been keeping up with Battlefront. I don't know if I did anything in the last 2 days.
So you've been just existing for the past couple of days.
All I do is vibe, I just float in and out of existence. And whenever I'm conscious and aware, I'm I'll do some Star Wars stuff, and then I'll dip out for a little while, probably go to work.
Well, this is not something I would say, but I've been in Marvel mode recently.
Oh, really?
Nice.
I started my me and my girlfriend decided that we're going to do because we haven't seen every single one of the MCU movies, so we decided we're going to watch through in release order every single MCU movie.
Nice.
That's on Disney Plus because Incredible Hulk is not on Disney Plus, and it's also not Mark Ruffalo anyway. So I don't think I would gain much.
I think Incredible Hulk's good. It's not great.
I was gonna say I never saw it. I was scared to say it, but I actually like Incredible Hulk.
It's fun though. Yeah, it's got big Attack of the Clones vibes where like everyone's kind of like ew at first, and then you're like no, please, like give it a chance. I promise.
That's a great point you make. Attack of the Clone vibes is a great way of describing it, to be honest.
And I also, that first Iron Man movie is so good. It's such a good movie.
Oh my gosh, dude.
Yeah, welcome to Marvel Talk, everybody.
Yeah, we should do like a spin-off. It's like the three of us talking about Marvel movies.
The entire 2 hours we just sit here talking about Marvel for a Star Wars podcast.
We just share WandaVision theories.
Well, what we like to do on these episodes is kind of ask our guests a series of questions pertaining to Star Wars so our listeners can kind of get an idea of who we're talking to. But kind of up first,
can build a profile on you.
Yeah. What was your introduction to Star Wars, do you think, if you can remember?
Oh, dude, I don't even know if I have a exact answer because I come from one of those families that it was like my grandpa was watching them and he raised my mom and my uncle on them, and then when my dad met my mom, he came from an extremely conservative background, so he hadn't seen any of them, so she just like introduced it to him. And so really I can't remember a time where there wasn't something Star Wars related going on.
I'm the same way. I'm the same way.
From the very start. Like there's nothing, it was always around. Even if it wasn't mine, my brother Spencer had something Star Wars going on. So
you blinked and had like over 200 toys. Like
exactly. It's like, dude, do you remember they rebranded it? I don't think they rebranded, but they looked different. But they were called like Galactic Heroes, and they were just like little rubber solid rubber toys, and there were hundreds of them, and you could buy them in 2-packs at Walmart. And
I think I know what you're talking about.
I went to Walmart, I was getting we had a bag that me and my brother would carry around full of them, and you could get the sets, you could get the big like what's the horn, the tri-horn from Attack of the Clones.
Oh my God.
You could get the big sets. You could get we had Millennium Falcon. I'm telling you, but like just that, there was always something. So there was never, I think, a point where I can remember not knowing what Star Wars was. It was always something.
Were you a prequel kid or an original trilogy kid?
Shoot. So I never saw any of the prequels in theaters. Listen to this.
I didn't either.
I always remember this so strangely because this was a weirdly like conscious decision that a group of two toddlers made. But Attack of the Clones was coming out in theaters, and my parents gave us the opportunity when Spencer had to be 6 or 7, I had to be 4 or 5. They said like, you know, the new Star Wars is coming out. We know you guys love Star Wars. Do you want to go see it in theaters? And we made the decision, 2 little tiny boys, that we had not seen 1 and 2 in theaters, so it was going to ruin the experience if we saw 3 and if we had the theater going experience for 3. So we were like, we'll wait till it comes out on DVD, and that way we can have.
Oh, so you mean for Revenge of the Sith?
Yes, for 3. Yeah, Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
But I mean, if I'm saying prequels versus OT, I think as a kid, there's so much about prequels that just catch your eye, and
it's also the fact that they're like newer movies, so like you can relate to them more.
And Anakin was cooler than Luke, and you wanted to be the bad boy like Anakin. But no, I think probably what I had most in rotation was the original trilogy, just because I would watch them a lot with my grandparents, and my grandpa loved the original trilogy. He had the VHSs, had several different editions, the gold editions, the original editions. He had like Star Wars, not New Hope.
Yeah.
So probably OT is mine for that era of my life. Definitely looking back, original trilogy, just there's something magical about it. For
sure. I have like a weird experience because like I didn't even know there was an original trilogy until like late in my Star Wars fandom,
Nice.
until around Revenge of the Sith came out. I told this on the last podcast, but I found like a Star Wars cereal box that had like a bunch of characters I didn't know, like Luke Skywalker and Chewbacca and like all these, and I was like, who are these guys? And then I found out that the original trilogy existed. And I was like, wait, were the Star Wars movies remade from these old movies or something? I was clueless.
One of them's named Skywalker, and the other one's named Skywalker. Dude, I'll just say this. Huge influence on me growing up. Lego Star Wars. And so that first
yeah.
Lego Star Wars on the PS2 had just the prequels. So I'm sure
I had it on GameCube. Yeah.
Oh, dude, just when the new one comes out, when the Skywalker saga comes out,
I'm binging
big
that.
hype for the Skywalker saga.
Yeah. This is kind of a difficult question because it's kind of like picking your favorite child. But
Oh my
who do you
gosh.
think is your favorite Star Wars character?
Character?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to ask movie. This is such a harder question. Okay, so there's layers to this question, so I'm going to try to be as brief as possible. I said to Jackson before we recorded, when I was growing up, I loved Max Rebo because he was blue and he looked like an elephant. And I thought if I could find like a Max Rebo stuffed animal, I never could. As a kid, I did love Max Rebo. I'd say the one that consistently I loved as a kid in my adolescent days, and then like now, I still hold a really close place in my heart for Lando. I love Lando.
Wow. Yeah.
Dude, Lando Calrissian, because he was a Star Wars character, but he was cool. It was like the idea that C-3PO was a robot, but he was funny. And like that blew my mind as a child. But like Lando, there's something about him. All the like pieces of fiction. I read the Lando novel. We had kind of talked about that earlier. But his comic run was really sweet. I mean, Donald Glover is just the man. So like the fact that he came on as Lando and Solo. But I gotta say, I think as far as character development, dude, Ben Solo is no joke. Like everybody kind of craps on the new ones for different reasons. But no matter what you think, if you love him or if you hate him, Adam Driver plus the writing of that character, that arc we saw, I mean, as a writer, love that.
Yes.
He's my new fave. I love Kylo Ren and I love Ben Solo. So
and I think everyone who's listened to this show before knows that I think that Adam Driver is 100% the best actor of the sequel trilogy.
So good.
He is so good.
Ridiculously good.
So this is more of a broad question. Answer this how you will. But why do you love Star Wars? What is it about Star Wars that connects with you?
Star Wars I love it for a lot of reasons, and it changes. That's kind of the beauty of it, I think, as a franchise. Because when I was a kid, I loved it because it was colorful and it was effects heavy, and it was sci-fi. And I love sci-fi even now, but I was just in love with science fiction when I was a kid. And it was the whole package. It was everything that made it a blockbuster franchise. It had the toys, it had the books, it had the games, it had all that. And so as a kid, it was stimulating. There was something. I could watch the movies and I could be playing Lego Star Wars on my Game Boy. And then afterwards I could go play Lego Star Wars on my PS2. So there was always something Star Wars to keep me stimulated. Then as I got older and I started liking movies, you really start to appreciate the filmmaking aspect of it. Because, the productions on the original trilogy specifically are just kind of groundbreaking. Like the practical effects and just the blockbuster element of it is like just groundbreaking. So that was really fascinating. And then you got to think, like, when I started aging up, they started coming out in theaters again. So we had the sequel trilogy, and so there was something to hold on to there. Yeah. I'd say the reason I love it now, why it still holds a very, very special place in my heart, is it is something that your whole family can be a part of it. Like, it's like my grandpa loves Star Wars. My parents love Star Wars. I love Star Wars. My niece and nephews love Star Wars. So like when I went to Celebration in 19, it was kind of a beautiful thing because you looked around and there wasn't just one type of person that was there for Star Wars. It was everybody was there to see something Star Wars related, whether it was Lego or whether it was the movies or whatever. And I don't know, there's not a whole lot of franchises out there, TV, film, what have you, that kind of have that family magic that Star Wars does. So that's, even though I don't get to participate in it as much these days, it's still very special to me for that family aspect.
Yeah, for sure. You kind of mentioned this, how the story of like the production of, especially like the original trilogy, I I have a recommendation for you if you are a fan of behind the scenes and movie things, which I know you are because you're a filmmaker. There's a book, and I've raved about this book probably every episode of this podcast. Okay. There's a book called How Star Wars Conquered the Universe by Chris Taylor.
Okay.
It is basically the story of the behind the scenes of the initial conception of Star Wars by Lucas back in like the 60s, up until the sale of Lucasfilm to Disney.
Whoa, okay.
And it is, I have it right here on my shelf right there.
Okay.
But it is such a great behind the scenes book, and like it dives into all like the drama that happened behind the scenes and like how hard it was to fund Empire and like all this awesome stuff, and like how there was so much pushback for the prequels and like what George was feeling around that time, and like how somebody wrote a biography about George without his permission. There's a bunch of great stuff.
I've read that biography, by the way.
Yeah. I highly recommend you read this book because
I'm gonna hop on my Amazon cart after we get rid of
it's super affordable. It's just so good. It's a cool. If I recommend nothing else, that is the one thing I recommend.
Dude, but there's such a warm feeling about before the special edition VHS tapes. There were when you put them in, you'd rewind them. My grandpa had this old Ford truck VHS rewinder. You'd stick the tape in, click the tail or the bed down, and it would start rewinding. And rewind, and then it would start. And there was about a 10-minute behind the scenes featurette on the VHS for the special editions, and I probably enjoyed those just as much as watching the movies when I was growing up. And looking back now, it's very obvious that I had that interest in filmmaking. But again, the fact that I can trace that back to Star Wars, that's another aspect of why I love it so much. Again, it changes so much. It's an interesting franchise that it changes in that way.
Yeah, and I think it's so great how like us three kind of grew up in an era where a lot of behind the scenes content was so open and available to us that like I think a lot of that is responsible for
instantly exposed us to
just
how,
like getting the bug of filmmaking immediately.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's weird because there's this magic. It's undeniable. It's something. To me, I was not shocked at all. I remember the day that Star Wars got bought by Disney. I was in middle school. I walked in that morning. I checked IGN on my phone because I was an IGN boy growing up, and the news popped up, and it made complete sense because there's that Disney magic that everybody talks about. There's Disney World, there's the anime, there's just a feeling about it, and Star Wars fits into that so well. But what you're talking about, there's this, it demystifies it. You see the background, you see the practical effects, and
for the prequels, you see the blue screen.
Exactly.
I remember that day too. I think I was in high school whenever Lucasfilm got sold, but I remember so much pushback of like, oh man, now Mickey Mouse is going to be in Star Wars. Like, shut up, you idiots.
Do you guys know how Star Wars works?
Yeah.
Would there be an animated mouse character? We knew Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but in the Star Wars universe?
Okay, but take the Star Wars movies and put the Muppets in them.
That's a great idea. Why haven't we had Star Wars Muppets yet?
Yoda is a Muppet.
There's an episode in the Muppet series that's all on Disney Plus that has the cast of Star Wars as their guest.
Really?
Yeah, I haven't watched it yet. I'm working my way through the Muppets right now.
Okay. I'm gonna have to check that out.
One more thing before we get into the meat of Return of the Jedi, but what do you think is your most anticipated Star Wars content coming out that's been announced?
I mean, it should go without saying, Lando, the miniseries, if that comes out. There's something about, I don't know if it's gonna come out.
Really?
Because it was very interesting to me the way they announced it, because they had the big announcements with they were like every announcement was like an event, and then
at the investors meeting,
and then Kathleen Kennedy was just like, and also we're doing a Lando thing. Anyways, on to the next thing. And when I was watching it, I was just like, I don't know if that's set in stone.
I think it's still very early in development.
Yeah. I could see that.
Is Donald Glover confirmed for it?
No.
No,
I didn't think so.
Nothing is confirmed.
We
for
just
it.
have a writer/producer attached. That's all we got.
Oh, I see.
Exactly. So if that comes out, I mean, that is to me like no. There's nothing in my mind that would say that's not my most anticipated. I'd say my two outside of that, and I actually forgot to mention, I do have another favorite character.
Go for
So
it.
sorry,
I have several as well.
I couldn't narrow it down to one. I will say the what's the animated show? The anthology. The anthology.
Oh, Visions?
Anime. Visions is I'm so excited for Visions because I love Death and Robots. I think that is one of the coolest shows being produced right now. And the fact that kind of concept is entering into the Star Wars brand, I think it's so cool. But also I think as a creator, it's cool to see that, because that's what the whole show's about, is they're giving opportunity to different creators to make something Star Wars. And I think that's also the beauty of Star Wars, is that you have all these different perspectives that could make something. So that's kind of a vehicle for that. So to me, that's a project that I'm really anticipated for. I have no clue what it's going to look like. Outside of that, Ahsoka. Gotta be.
Yeah.
Ahsoka, to me, she is right there with Kylo, because her development from Snips to
how much hate she got so early on, and how she developed to become this cult classic phenomenon character.
The final season Ahsoka of Clone Wars is one of my favorite characters in the last 5 years that I've seen on screen. And
I'm so excited to get to season 7.
I know, dude. Anything David Filoni touches, I'm behind. Her appearance in Mando was so sweet. Rosario Dawson, so sweet. So I can't wait for that one. That one's going to be another level for me.
And I'm sure we'll get plenty of Thrawn in that one.
Oh, can you imagine, dude? Thrawn, a live action Thrawn. I'm freaking out, man.
Yep. I think just this past week, this kind of broke before we covered news for the week, but Benedict Cumberbatch said, he was asked about if he would be down to play Thrawn, and he said, nah, not interested.
Interesting. So at Celebration, I don't know if this ever made it outside of Celebration, because it was so cool going to Celebration. It was like its own little world.
Yeah, I had plans to go, but some life things happened and I couldn't go.
It's an undertaking. We got tickets for free somehow. Wow. Our uncle paid our tickets, because again, it's a family thing. So he was just I want the family to come, and so I appreciate that. But so at Celebration, there was this big banner when you walked in.
Yeah, I saw that on a lot of the Facebook groups that I'm in.
And so it was it was a mix between live action and animation. Yeah. So all the animated characters looked vaguely live action.
I saw that, yeah.
Thrawn looked exactly like James Bond. What's the guy's name?
Daniel Craig?
No.
Pierce Brosnan?
Pierce Brosnan. Looked exactly like Pierce Brosnan. So there was this kind of undercurrent running that you'd hear people say, is that supposed to be?
That's not a bad cast.
No, he would kill.
That's not a bad cast. I think
yeah, it was interesting. So, dude, Thrawn in live action, that's Jake McGruder through right there. So, that's my big one, I think, probably, if I had to.
Yeah. I think the way to go about Thrawn live action is to don't reveal him until it happens in the show.
Yes.
Because imagine just not expecting it, and you're just watching an episode of the Ahsoka show, and then we just get a slow push in on the Thrawn's profile, and we don't know who it is yet, and when he turns around and boom, it's Thrawn. Cut the credits.
Ooh, that's
how
Disney
cool.
Plus right there. Come on, that's how they do it now.
Yeah.
Also, if Taika makes one, I'll be there day one.
He has plans. He says he's ready to ruin Star Wars and ruin everybody's childhood.
But I don't know if that'll happen. I don't know if that's one I also don't know if we'll see. But, Taika's my man, so I'm stoked for that, too.
And I understand your hesitation as to whether these will actually happen, because we've had so many, directors come in for projects for Star Wars, and then at the last second, they're like, never mind, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
We get a lot of that sometimes.
Ryan J. He was going to do a trilogy. Haven't heard anything about that, huh?
Oh, yeah. Actually, recently, he just confirmed that he is actually still developing it. It is still happening.
Wow. I'm shocked.
I'm excited. I'm very excited
too. I love that man. I love him.
But I think it's time to get into what people are actually tuning in for. Return of the Jedi.
Move on from me. I'm sick of hearing my own voice.
Revenge of the Jedi, as it was previously called. But I think that this movie was It's probably my most nostalgic Star Wars movie that's not a prequel. It's just the one that I watched the most as a kid because I loved the Emperor so much.
Interesting.
Kind of as some background, I was like a Harry Potter kid as a kid, and the Emperor kind of reminded me of like a wizard because he had like the Force lightning and all that fun stuff. But
I made that joke today, actually, that the Emperor was a wizard.
But kind of as a broad overall reaction, what is your kind of big picture reaction, Jake, to Return of the Jedi? What do you think about this movie kind of overall?
I say same. There's something about that Jabba's Palace opening 45 minutes. That's to me like concentrated. What I'm talking about, like Star Wars magic. That's that. So like, I remember as a kid, my grandpa would ask which one do you want to watch? You can pick one of the tapes, and Return of the Jedi was the go-to. So like that is agreed. I'd say I've seen the first two more, but as far as what I link with Star Wars nostalgia, Return of the Jedi, it's peak OT. It's peak trilogy, where it's just like we get literally everything from 4 and we get everything from 5, but just like we cut the fat, and it's just like we're gonna give you a unadulterated Star Wars movie, and it is Star Wars. It's funny because I hadn't seen it in a couple of years before you had asked me to watch for the episode, and it was just so Star Wars. I don't even know how to explain it, but it's just so Star Wars. If that makes sense.
I think it's the Star Wars film that has the most swashbuckling adventure vibe. Like it's just so adventurous.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
For lack of a better term.
I think you say that because that's the word that came to my mind. It felt kind of Goonies. Like there's something about the pirates, like when Luke's walking the plank, even like it just feels like an adventure movie. It feels like time travelers.
And you got like Jabba, like this big gangster, and like the Weequays banging the cymbals and the freaking musical number.
What's your guys' take on the musical number? Because
dude, I love some Sice Noodles, dude. I love some Max Rebo and Sice Noodles. I don't care.
My man Max Rebo was killing it.
I get with anything that's funky.
Yeah,
it is funky. It's just so funny because, like, I don't know, Braydon, you're probably aware because you were on our show a couple weeks ago, but I love David Lynch. Like, he's my hero. And you guys probably know this, that David Lynch at one point was on to direct Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I just imagine like George Lucas talking to David Lynch and just being like, yeah, there's all these practical effects and there's these animals, and then there's going to be a jazz musical number. And weirdly enough, that kind of seems like David Lynch a little bit.
Absolutely.
David Lynch is like, I want the little space bears to yell and have large New York accents.
God. But yeah, Jackson, what is kind of your, I know this is in your this is like very high ranking in your Star Wars ranking, but what do you think about this movie?
Literally took the words out of my mouth. This movie is the perfect half and half of what we just got with the last two into this fully, I think the theme of this episode is family movies, is that it's got everything that it's a good family movie that everyone can understand, but it's still packed with kind of the darker adult, the bigger things that happened from Empire that kind of close up in this without it being, I guess kiddie down for it, And
it does such a great job of picking up where Empire left off.
Absolutely.
So, can't agree more. It feels like it's weird because I feel like that's almost what the Ewoks are for. I don't know if that was the intention when they were writing it, but like you're right, it could get bogged down and it could be so heavy, because I really think the Luke storyline in this is really, really great. But it is pretty heavy, especially like the end. It's just, I mean, it gets pretty heavy.
It does.
So it makes me wonder, because I love Empire. That's very stereotypical. To say Empire's the best one, but it feels like you're going back to Empire in those scenes where it's Luke and the Emperor and Vader, and then we come back and we have Ewok stuff. So it makes me wonder if that was intentional or not.
And I think it's also because the stakes are so high with the Luke and Vader stuff. and then we get with the Ewoks, and it more just feels like a fun family movie.
Be like, we're gonna catch the bad guys. Come on.
But then we're cutting back to some serious like family drama happening with Luke and Vader, and I love that a lot. This is. Again, I say this every time because this is just a hard question because I hate ranking the Star Wars films. But where do you think this ranks in your definitive ranking of Star Wars films?
I'd put this one up with Revenge of the Sith. Like, I think, I mean, there's something about those first two that I love the franchise. Obviously, it holds a very special place in my heart. I've said that several times. But there's something in those first two that I feel like they just didn't capture, if that makes sense. And that's not knocking on them. There's just something so indescribable. It sounds dramatic, but like about Empire and Star Wars, like so I'd say those two are always gonna just be kind of untouchable in my eyes, and I'm sure there's something with nostalgic there. But then like Revenge of the Sith and this one I'd say are tight.
So where does Revenge of the Sith rank in your ranking?
I'd say right under those two. I'd say Revenge of the Sith. It's. I mean, it changes when I think about different parts of them. But yeah, Revenge of the Sith, this one, and Rogue One all kind of sit in that next slot under the top two
of the tier list. Yeah. Jackson, what about you?
This is my go-to when I just want to throw something on. I usually am like sitting there and it happens without fail every time. I'll be doing something, I'll realize I'm bored, and I'll kind of just sit up and be like, I think I want to watch Return of the Jedi. Be like, I think that's what I'm doing. And my girlfriend will be like, what are you saying to yourself? And I'm like, I'm gonna watch a Star Wars. Give me a minute.
Yeah, I remember your immediate reaction after watching Empire was to turn on Jedi.
Absolutely, yeah. I finished it, and then when I was like, I think I'm gonna keep going. Actually,
dude. It's like I said, I hadn't seen it in a couple of years, and I think again it's just so linked with my childhood that like there's something like kind of keeping me away from it, weirdly enough. But I'm so glad I watched it because I mean it's just magical. It is just a magical movie. It's
that last 45 that I really want to see in theaters, like for the first time. Like I really just want to know what that's like.
Agreed.
Imagine being a kid in the 1980s, anticipating this movie and finally being able to go see it, and then you see that whole climactic space battle with like the ground battle on Endor and all the Vader stuff happening at the same time, like three parallel kind of actions happening at the same. It'd be so cool to
moments,
see. I can't imagine, like, especially the scene in that kind of sequence of Vader, Luke, Palpatine, where they're all together, but the scene where they go under and it's just like the blue lights and the red light of the saber and the green light. There's something so epic, for lack of a better term. We use that a lot on the podcast, where it just feels, I guess, climactic is the word also, that it just feels like we've been building to this moment for these stories, and it feels so earned. Like that fight, it's like we're finally getting that moment we wanted. And so, dude, that in theaters had to be another level. But also, it's funny you bring that up again, because I think of like the fans in the 80s who have been waiting since Empire.
3 years. 3 years.
3 years for this movie. And then when everybody's together on Jabba's palace, that scene where they're all just like lined up, 3PO's behind, kind of translating for Jabba, that had to feel so, I don't even know what to the word to use, but like it's like finally we've collided. Like all these storylines, Lando has,
the pieces are coming together. Yeah,
exactly. And that had to just feel so
satisfying,
accomplished. Like we did it. We were Star Wars fans and we made it to this moment. I got that feeling, and I've seen it a bunch of times, and it still just felt so satisfying.
And I love how this movie puts you straight into the middle of like an espionage mission. Mm-hmm. Like it takes no time to just like sit there and set up how the characters are doing and like where they are. It just like throws you into a mission they're in the middle of, and they're a rescue mission at that.
Feels very Bond.
And it doesn't like tell you what it is right away. You know, like you have to
kind of
figure
put
out
the
what it
pieces
is
together as you're watching it. You're like, okay, this random bounty hunter caught Chewbacca, and
they're like,
they're turning him in.
Like,
and,
okay.
Yeah, and the reveal that it's Leia whenever she rescues Han, and like it's just like,
it's my favorite. It's Lando pulling down the skiff mask, and he goes.
For no reason.
As if we didn't recognize him without it.
Yeah. I thought the same thing. I was just like, that was for the fans. That wasn't for Lando.
Absolutely was.
Shot real quick, yeah.
It absolutely was that. But I just love how like every like main player from the past two movies shows up in that sequence, and we get it's basically like a curtain call of every character that we love from the past two movies.
I think it was structurally, it was really smart of them to start on the Death Star, because we get that we touched base with Vader and what's going on in that world, and then we don't see them for another, again, 30-40 minutes. So it was really well placed that we start there, and again, it just feels kind of grand. We hit him getting off his fighter, and the music. We get the Empire music, get the Imperial March, and I think that was a really good call on their part to start there, because if we're touching base with every character, Darth Vader is obviously,
of course,
equally important to those leads, and so we need to know what's going on with him, and then we can move on to that. So
and it's funny because I was watching this, and I don't know who the guy's name is, but whenever Vader gets off the shuttle and he has to meet with that one guy, and he's talking about how like, oh, your lack of progress is making the Emperor upset or whatever, and this guy has a line that I think is impossible to say. And he says, "We shall double our efforts super quickly," in a British accent. Oof. And it is the most big tongue-tied line. I don't think.
We should double efforts.
See, it's hard. It's very hard to do.
Our efforts.
We should double our efforts.
I got to really land on the pho of
I
efforts.
don't know how he did it, but that is like such flawless
That's why
delivery.
He gets paid the big bucks, baby.
He got himself a Star War.
Yeah, he got a stack from doing the Star War. But kind of backtracking here a little bit. Jake, what do you think was your first experience with Return of the Jedi? Like, do you remember like your first experience?
I mean, like I said, the thing I remember is going over to my grandpa's house. My grandpa would make killer milkshakes. And so he would say, like, you want a milkshake? And I'd be, toddler Jake. I'd be like, yeah, I want a milkshake. And he would knock out the frozen milk because it's East Prairie. So we'd buy milk by the fives. We wait till it's on sale at the local grocery store, and then we freeze it. So he'd get the frozen milk out. He'd start making the ice cream. He'd say, you go in there and pick what movie you want to watch. And I would go straight to the cabinet, open it up. There was all the VHS Star Wars. He kept them separately from the other VHS tapes.
That's how I'm trying to be.
Because that's how important they were.
In a secret combination lock chest.
Yeah, right. You got to answer a really deep trivia question. That's only a
you have to answer three different riddles.
Yeah.
What was the about the Boba video game that never came out?
Oh, 1313.
1313.
That was the code. It was like 13. This hasn't even been a thing yet.
Yeah.
No, so open it up, special edition tapes, because that had the behind the scenes stuff. Put it in the VHS rewinder, the Ford VHS rewinder. It was going to be a good night. He would make popcorn with peanuts in it. Dude, that is such a grandpa thing.
You had an awesome childhood. What
the? It was great. There was literally nothing wrong with it. It was perfect.
Well, awesome. Jackson, what about you? What do you think was, if you can remember, what do you think was your first experience with Return of the Jedi?
I don't know. I just kind of have gone through most of my existence knowing about Return of the Jedi. I guess it's got to be that time when my dad just showed me everything, but I only have specific memories from like A New Hope and I guess some of Empire, but like I know my dad sat me down and made me watch all three.
Yeah, I come from a kind of a non-Star Wars family. Like I had to the only reason I knew about Star Wars growing up was because of my brother, because he, had all the movies and the games and the Legos and all that kind of stuff. But I think I have the same story with kind of Empire with this, is that I think I went to Blockbuster or something and I saw the cover and I was like, well, there's another Star Wars movie I haven't seen, so I might as well get it. And I got it, and lo and behold, it became, for a long time, Return of the Jedi was my favorite Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
For a very long time.
Yeah, I could see that. I could agree with you probably at a point in my life that it was my go-to.
Yeah. Because I think it's just like, the epic climax of the entire thing coming to a head, and like you finally get to see what ends up happening to Vader in the end.
Yeah, dude. Like
it just speaks to you.
Greater. Vader's story is so great.
It's a greater story.
It's a greater story than Luke's. One could even argue. That's what it was. I was setting up a joke, so I'm glad you guys picked up on that.
Very nice.
No, the Vader story again. It just feels so epic. It feels so climactic. It is all those things. It's a great third movie. It's a great example of what a third act of a trilogy should be. I think.
Such a satisfying conclusion.
Oof,
yes,
so good.
Yeah,
I love watching the old newscasts of filming people leaving the theaters, and they're all just like it was perfect. They're like I couldn't do. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just people like it's the best thing I've ever seen.
Dude, something about like you were right about me. Tell your sister you were right about me. Will never not like. I can never not feel that in my chest when Vader says that. Takes the helmet off, looks at him, and then just like, you were right about me. Something about that just hits every single time. And it's such a beautiful conclusion to that storyline.
And that's the first time he's looking his son in the eyes for real.
Oh, my good Lord.
Man. We'll get into it much deeper later. We'll get into the themes and emotions of those kind of moments.
Can't wait.
Kind of from a broad point of view, I don't have to get too specific, but what are kind of some of your favorite scenes and moments from this movie, just as a whole? What scene and moment comes to your mind when you think of Return of the Jedi? What speaks to you?
I would say the 40-minute Jabba sequence.
Just that whole opening act.
It's so cool, and it's so fun, and it's everything Star Wars. It's the practical effects that's iconic. There's no Return of the Jedi in my mind without that. Like it holds little weight. Obviously, there's some to the rest of the story. Getting Han out is huge for the rest of the story, obviously. Yeah. But just the aesthetic of it.
You kind of know they're gonna get out of it.
Exactly. It could have been off screen. Could have been easily off screen, or a 10-minute sequence. But the fact that they did it for 40 minutes. It's just so iconic. I'd say them getting captured by the Wookiees, the Ewoks is so fun. That's the family aspect of it. But to me, the moment of Return of the Jedi is that moment where Luke talks about Leia to Darth Vader, and he kind of taps into Luke's dark side, and we get that just like there's something animalistic.
Your feelings have betrayed you,
dude. In Luke's eye, when he's just like wailing on Vader, that's the move. To me, that's the movie. Like that's
so much emotional weight behind that moment. Yes.
Mm-hmm. It's that slow truck shot through the stairs of Luke and just fighting him and Vader, just like trying to hold on with it.
I was thinking, and again, we'll probably touch on this thematically, but like it shows you that Luke is becoming the Jedi because he is so offensive, or he's so defensive. Like he's not pursuing it. And so it's that juxtaposition we see of like he's being the good Jedi Luke, and now he's on the offense now. He is on, and he's mad. And that's the movie. To me, that's the image that's seared into my brain. And then the last scene, the celebration scene, just fires on Endor. There are so many moments that make Return of the Jedi that it's hard to just pick one.
For sure. Yeah. Jackson, what about you? What sequences, scenes, moments do you think come to mind?
I basically covered the whole movie. I apologize.
Yeah, right. Specifically in the Jabba sequence, it's when Luke shows up. I love that scene where it's him talking to Jabba and everyone's kind of watching from the side. My favorite shot of it, though, is Boba Fett like flicking the chin of the girls he's talking to, and he strolls out. And,
dude, he's a stud. You can tell Boba Fett gets in this movie.
But I'm a big fan of the scene with Luke and Leia where she can just tell he's off. She can tell he's deciding what he's going to do, because Luke, is pretty much he's not trying to sacrifice himself, but that's what he's doing, is he's essentially trying to stall the Emperor and for the rebels to show up. And you can just tell Leia's like, she can sense that sadness on him, and he's just kind of humbled because he's like, like, hey, you're the other one. Oh, well, that's cool to know. You'll figure that out eventually. Same with like the Endor scenes when they get snatched up in the net, and it's the big slab of meat that you can't even like process what it is. Like your
arms,
like you're like, what animal is that? Like what did they get?
Raw meat. I thought you mean when they were actually in the thing and their like trap. Arms are all hanging out. Dude, yeah, it's just like George Lucas was like, get me meat, get me some meat.
And then the entire Vader fight, because it's not really a fight. Most of it is just conversation. And it's those final dialogues between Luke and Vader before Vader goes back to Anakin, that it's just like, it's like those last ditch punches that Vader's throwing, where he's like, I'll take your sister, I'll take everything that you love. And then Luke still beats it by not letting him break him. Well, he still kind of breaks him, but even then, like, it isn't until the Emperor's like, I'll break him first.
I was going to say, James Earl Jones kills it in this movie. He does, obviously, so iconic. His voice for Vader, so iconic.
This and Empire, I completely agree.
His performance, like in that last hour, I guess, he like does such a good job of like portraying the conflict with just like blatantly trying to ignore it. It's like a lot of nuance in a vocal performance specifically that stood out to me this time. I didn't remember him kind of being a standout, but I think he totally is.
For sure. Yeah.
I was going to ask, sorry, but do you guys know, was there ever an intention that Luke was going to die? Because I got that vibe this time. That like
there was not an intention that he would die, but there was a slight intention that we're supposed to believe that he might turn to the dark side.
Okay. Interesting.
Because there was also Mark Hamill kind of had in mind shooting this movie that he thought it would be cool if Luke kind of tuned into his dark side tendencies. And he even said that like the original kind of twist at the end, which obviously was scrapped very early on, the original twist at the end was going to be that Luke kills Vader, puts on the Vader helmet and says, now I'm Vader. And kind of goes on ruining the galaxy like that. That obviously would not have gone over well with fans.
That would have been not satisfying.
But yeah, I think the reason why it feels like that why the stakes are so high for Luke and that like the emotional weight is so high that he might die, I think is because of that subtext of he might turn to the dark side. I think we're supposed to believe that he might turn to the dark side.
It's worse than dying.
Yeah. I think that's done really well because like that Leia scene between him and Leia, it does feel like a goodbye. And,
yeah, it does.
The scene where he talks to the Emperor, and there's an air of we're gonna lose Luke, and like it's just good direction, I guess.
It's not crazy to believe that, or it's not crazy for Luke to believe that he's going into this situation and probably not coming out of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's going up against the two most powerful dark side users of all time.
He turns himself in, and his plan is essentially to stall.
Yeah, to stall so the rebellion can get away, and then Luke plans on kind of just like dying, basically.
Yeah. Well, he probably doesn't see a logical way or realistic way out,
But I think my favorite moments is I do love a lot of the Endor stuff, and I love Leia's relationship with the Ewoks and how she immediately, instead of like being aggressive towards them, she like takes them in as her own, almost like Wicket and like, all these different creatures. I don't know what it is, but for some reason, the whole Tatooine Jabba's palace sequence is like Jake said earlier, the encapsulation of Star Wars at its best. Like that is just Star Wars.
I know. Swashbuckling is a great term. That's just what it feels like.
Yeah.
It just feels like adventure. It feels they're in the holding cells underneath with all the robots. Like there's that dingy kind of aspect.
Yeah, and they got to kill a big like monster, like the Rancor. And
We've been
Sarlacc pit.
without an interpreter since the master got unpleased and disintegrated him. Disintegrated.
It cuts to the droid getting his limbs pulled off.
Just getting pulled, yeah.
But like when they come in, whoever the operator was, which by the way, can we just talk? I don't know if this was going to come up specifically in the questions. The puppetry in this, not only the design of the puppetry, but the amount of things that were being puppeted on screen is insane. Like insane. But it cracked me up because whoever the puppet operator, when C-3PO and R2 were coming in the room, they were just kind of just like, yeah, just do something. Just kind of just make it look like he's getting pulled. Because the robot's just kind of going like, up and down, up and down, up and down. But it just cracked me up.
That's whenever I would play 2005 Battlefront 2 in Jabba's palace, I would always hear him yell and I could never find him. And then you'd see the sparks fly out and he's getting pulled and you're like, there he is. Like, there he is. You little rat, you got past me.
And I do love, I had only seen the special edition, so I never grew up knowing the original versions. But this stupid Snice Noodle song with Max Rebo, I don't know what it is, but that feels so Star Wars too. Like so many people hate it. It's just weird enough to be Star Wars.
It should not work. That's kind of what I was feeling the water earlier. Like I expected you guys to maybe hate it because it shouldn't work. Like even
no, it straight up does.
I think it goes hard.
It's on your playlist.
It goes dummy hard,
dude. It's the
wow, biggie, wow,
wow. His mouth, just his big mouth.
Yeah. I just love the music too. Like it's just groovy. I love it.
Whenever there's a cantina band, it's their excuse to let's put some music with some sauce on it.
And they go so hard.
Let's show them what drugs we did.
They don't need to go as hard as they go, but they go.
Dude, because obviously it goes without saying there's no Star Wars without John Williams, and John Williams is so orchestral and beautiful, but it's fun when we get to hear within the world some again just something with a little sauce on it rather than
mustard. Yeah.
exactly
Yeah. I think the entire original trilogy is so quotable. And there's just so many great quotes in this movie too. We'll start with you, Jake. What are some of your favorite quotes of this movie?
Now witness the firepower of this fully armed and operational battle station.
I'm afraid it's quite operational. Yeah.
Dude, no, I mean, Dawada is...
Dawada.
Bib Fortuna, again, he's so creepy, but I like him so much. Dude, in Mando, when he popped up at the end, I was just like, my boy, it's my boy Bib Fortuna.
It's the fat vampire with tails on his head.
That's such another seared image in my brain. Just him with this kind of his mangly teeth and Luke, force powering him a little bit, doing a little mind wipe on him.
He always looks like wet.
Ew. Yes. Yeah, he does. It's like slimy.
Dude, also, Han's one-liners in this
are
on point.
Well, short work is better than no work.
Yeah.
What does he say when he's just like, you'll be terminated quickly or something? And he's just like, good, I hate a long wait or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, go Han.
There's not much to see. I was born here, You're going to die here. Convenient.
I think that's also the way that Harrison Ford approached this whole performance was just get this over with.
Agreed.
Let's just get this over with.
Harrison Ford, yeah.
I was gonna say the same
Well,
thing.
he straight up did not want to be in this movie. They had to raise his pay a crap ton in order for him to be in this movie because he thought that Han should. And it wasn't because he hates Star Wars. It's because he legitimately thought that Han's arc was done by the end of Empire. He thought, this is it. Han's arc is done. It's time to move on. And the fans loved him so much they needed him back, especially because it would get a lot more people in movie theater seats. So they had to raise his pay a lot for him to come back for Return of the Jedi.
Han is so Star Wars, like even more so than Luke, almost, I would say. Like something about the appeal of just like it's very Western, but it's very sci-fi. I think Han really nails that. But I don't know. He just I could see him. There's a natural kind of ending after Empire. Like I could see that feeling very natural of him going after that. So I don't know.
We talked about quotes, talked about moments. I think it is time to dig in to our favorite characters in Return of the Jedi. I have a lot. Obviously, the main crew is a given. We know that we love Luke, Han, and Leia. What are some kind of either characters that are introduced in this movie or just like standout, not really upfront characters that you love in this movie?
I'll just go off again. Lando, my boy. He's great, and the way he changes, even from, he feels like, again, it almost feels like a natural place where Han could have left, because Lando fills that everyman role kind of nicely. Like he just feels like almost like the substitute for the audience. He feels you can relate to him a lot, which is different because in Empire he was so suave and he was just he was almost like royalty in Empire.
Yeah.
And this one he's very down to earth, and so it's cool to see him like that. So yeah, I'd say Lando's probably, but I mean that's my go-to for the whole franchise, I guess.
Yeah. I love the Ewoks. They're just so cute.
Dude.
I don't get the hate.
It's the whole thing. I think it is.
Yeah, I don't get the hate either.
It's the Jar Jar thing. It has to be the Jar Jar thing. That there is some there's some nostalgia linked with the Ewoks, because like but I'm sure there was a point where you were a snotty teenager and you were just like, something cute, hate it. And so like same with Jar Jar. I think like a lot of the Jar Jar hate came from it's not cool. Jar Jar's not cool.
Or like the internet says I can't like Jar Jar, so I don't like Jar Jar.
Exactly.
I watched a YouTube video about how Jar Jar is the worst character, so I'm not allowed to like Jar Jar.
That's something interesting you guys should dive into someday. Just the difference in reception from the OT without the internet, and then like the prequels were kind of that early internet days where I'm sure they like
cultural response and phenomenon that happened through each trilogy.
I'm sure there's a lot to dive into.
Prequel era was the first, like I think it was 1999. The first Star Wars podcast was produced.
That's
Jedi
awesome.
Talk. Jackson, what about you? What are some kind of characters that are kind of specific to this movie? I say that I use that term roughly because there are a lot of characters in this that do pop up in other movies. But what characters do you love in this movie?
I'm a big fan of. It's actually, I'll straight up say, Nine Numb, Lando's co-pilot.
Yes, I love Nine Numb.
I love just like the gibberish. He just kind of replies, and it's when they blow it up, and it's and he's laughing to himself.
He has such like a surfer dude laugh.
Yeah. He kind of like nods to himself.
Yeah.
Admiral Akbar, the classic.
Oh, yeah, it's a trap.
Yeah, the classic. I'm blanking on her name. Who led the rebellion and became the new chancellor? Mon Mothma, yeah. Oh, dude, her Bothan line is one of my favorites.
Many Bothans died to bring us this information.
So much. I forgot. That actress had to feel like
chilling.
Dude, she was feeling that. She was just like, I'm gonna put some mustard on this performance right now.
Putting some mustard on this movie.
You got another director when they were on set. They were just like, "Are you cool? Do we need to take a 5?
Do we need to take a 5? Are we good?
Thing we have,
dude. I was gonna say it should also not go with. I mean, you made mention to it earlier, Braydon, but this is such a introduction of Force to Palpatine. Like,
yes,
when he comes in hot. Like, this is his movie, I think, as far as antagonists, and it's just interesting because we have the Empire with the monkey eyes, and like we get that kind of that tease. But yeah, no, I think he comes in hot in this one.
I didn't realize what you just said with the monkey eyes. I just processed. He's talking about the hologram in Empire. He's talking about
the OG hologram. Yeah,
they probably took that out.
They replaced it with Ian McDermott now.
Yeah, it was like this weird woman with a bunch of prosthetics on, and they put like ape, like chimpanzee, they're the same thing, but chimpanzee eyes on the woman's prosthetics.
Awesome.
Like superimposed them, and it looked awful. It looked horrible.
It looked bad. But that was the one I knew, dude. Growing up, when you watched Empire, you got the monkey eyes cut.
Yeah, the monkey eyes cut.
And George tried to CG it with the special editions, and it looked even worse.
No, it actually was not CG for the special edition. It was, they refilmed Ian McDermott doing those lines for that scene in Empire.
Speaking of holograms, I wanted to get you guys' take. What do you think? Does Anakin work at the end for you?
Yes,
I think he does.
Okay. I think when I was watching it, it felt a little weird, I guess.
I think if you are back in 1983, yes. I think that Sebastian Shaw being there was the right thing, because that was the last thing Luke saw of him, because that was Luke's version of who he knew Anakin as. But in the grand scale of the entire saga, I think having Anakin there works because of how emotionally attached the audience is to Anakin by the end of watching the prequels plus the Clone Wars and everything.
That's who died, you know?
Yeah.
And I think any form Anakin has seen post the lava, he doesn't want to have. So he's reverting back to the last look he had as Anakin Skywalker, which was this young, 23-year-old Jedi Knight.
Yeah. That's fair.
Yeah.
It was, I think, also probably the quality of, and they actually, you could tell that they worked on it to make it look similar to the other holograms, but also like there's just something different between a digital camera and a film camera, and I'm sure they shot those.
It's got the weird like floating head effect because they only use like the neck up of Hayden Christensen, and it's just kind of it is kind of wonky.
But
yeah, I think my favorite character in this movie is Palpatine, just because he has a looming presence over this entire movie. The entire time. I love the power he has over like the entire galaxy.
The scene he has with Vader when Vader's like, Luke's here, and he's like, yeah, I know. He's like, shut up. He's like, I'm working on my plan. You're gonna go on the Endor planet. You're gonna go get him, you idiot. And Vader's like, okay. He's like, but what if? He's like, can we get him? He's like, yeah. He's like, it's the plan, guide.
It's so weird.
He really is. He really is just a bully the whole time. Like even
he's mean to Vader in this.
He's mean to Vader, but also his whole thing about Luke. It's so like I'm gonna convince you need to be with me because you need to be with me. He doesn't really have an argument other than just like you're gonna do it because I say you're gonna do it.
Yeah,
and it's a bully. That's just he
it's
plays
also
it
like
so well.
The line he says to Luke, it's like he's strike me down. He goes like, and you will follow your father's fate of being mine. Like
exactly. There's no win. There's no win for Luke. Like. If he kills him, he's gonna be Sith. If he doesn't, he's gonna die. So like why again? It's just Ian McDermott does such a great job of being like a slimy little genius. Like he's smart. You just know he's smart. He knows what's up. He's planned.
And he comes from a theater background. Watching his performance too. Like it's such a,
of course,
it's such a Shakespearean
performance. Yeah,
he does. And now, young Skywalker. You will die.
You will die. And he says it so matter-of-factly, too. He just like...
You will die.
Yeah, you will die. It's just so funny how he like low-key has a death wish, too.
Yeah.
He's like, come on, somebody please strike me down. Anybody.
He's like, please.
Dude. Obviously, this wasn't the intention back then, but he was probably like, my body's getting tired. I need a new clone body.
Yeah. Which speaking of like the whole Emperor and the clone stuff, I hope in some of the material we're getting, we'll get a little more backstory, especially with like Mandalorian maybe, because they kind of hinted towards it in the Mandalorian season 2 with the whole cloning stuff that we end up seeing in the sequels. I hope we kind of connect the dots with that somehow.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was thinking about that when we were watching it. So much of what Star Wars' storytelling has become is filling in gaps.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that's a really interesting take. I think they tried to continue with the sequels, and I think, however you feel about it, it ended up, a certain type of way. And I think maybe they're not really interested in continuation right now. They're more so interested in let's fill in some of the middle parts.
For sure.
And, I just think that's an interesting take, especially with such a franchise so big, to do something like that. It's just it's interesting. It's just interesting to watch them and go that route. Kind
of speaking of Ian McDermott's performance as the Emperor, what are some other performances in this movie that kind of stand out to you?
Again, I say James Earl Jones. Just in that vocal performance, he delivers a lot of conflict, and he's an OG. He's so good. Like James Earl Jones, I mean, you can date back to Strangelove. He was even killing it back then. Like he knows his way around. And it's interesting you bring that up about McDermott. There's something very theatrical about Star Wars. It's a space opera, and so to get somebody, I'm sure he had that theater background, and. To me, that was the one this time specifically that stood out, was James Earl Jones.
Jackson, what about you?
I think Mark Hamill steps out for this one. I think he
steps up to the plate for this one.
Well, his betrayal of this adult Luke, this Jedi Knight, really, he interprets it really successfully, and I think it's also funny knowing that Mark Hamill in real life is very much like Farm Boy A New Hope Luke.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen, there's a TikTok I've seen where it's Farm Boy Luke and he goes, "Oh, look at that. Not a thought behind those eyes. Sweet baby boy. So clueless." That's Mark Hamill. So,
Michael, you poor thing.
Yes. Not a thought behind those eyes. I think he's did a really good job at, bringing that, the intensity and the seriousness of the situation and be able to match up to, James Earl Jones and Ian McDermott and, just these big heavy hitters. It was this final scene that everybody gave their all and it just absolutely rocked. And it was this Luke you didn't see and didn't fully know, it was like you had to relearn who this person was. And it was this adult, smart, conscious and wise person who was still learning.
Yeah. And on your point, because I think you make a solid point about Mark Hamill, I think there's something very respectable. I think even it's just a different level of performance, as somebody like Ian McDermott, who he's acting up against, as somebody like Alec Guinness and 4. But you got to think he's working with somebody that's his acting partner. And one thing I really respect about this movie, because I'm glad you brought it up, it feels like he is actively trying the whole time. He is putting in the work the whole time. And I think for something like this where it has to feel so final for this character, I'm sure he wanted to go out with a bang for performance. And it was cool because it's cool that you bring that up, because I agree. Even scenes where he's in the background, and this is more so from a filmmaking standpoint, but when he's not the subject of the shot, you even see he's really trying to participate in those scenes too. And that's a very respectable thing. Especially
when he breaks character when the Ewoks show up. And he starts laughing and you can tell he starts covering his mouth.
Oh, really?
Yeah, him and Harrison Ford start laughing when the Ewoks surround them because no one told them what was going to happen. They just knew they were no one had seen the Ewok designs. All of a sudden, these little bears show up and they both kind of are like, "What's happening? What's going on?"
Yeah,
and it's a very believable response actually, because I would also kind of laugh if I was being surrounded by tiny bears.
I still think that I think for Mark Hamill, I think his best performance as Luke Skywalker of all time is in The Last Jedi.
Agreed.
But
100%.
I think the way that Luke comes into this movie and the way that Mark Hamill goes about Luke's character, especially in his introduction of the movie, where he is, he comes on to Jabba's palace on Tatooine, is he's so put together and collected in a way that we don't see him before. Because in Empire, he has a lot of, me and Jackson talked about this last week, how Mark Hamill kind of has a lot of Muppet lines, like a lot of like weird, like TV-esque lines where they're kind of cringy. Same with the first one. I think that this is the first movie that gives Mark Hamill the opportunity to actually give Luke some depth. And like it literally just act in a dramatic sense. I think agreed. That Luke's character gets so much more depth in this movie, and he gets there's just so many. I wish they would have kept in that scene where he's building the lightsaber.
Oh, so cool.
That would have been so cool to see. But
cool.
Yeah, I think Mark Hamill is definitely a stand-up performance for me, and I mean, who can't love Ian McDiarmid as the Emperor? I mean, so come on, he's so I think he's a standout in this movie. Like, whenever I think of the Emperor, I think of either Revenge of the Sith or I think of this movie.
Speaking on Mark Hamill for a second, I think because I was thinking this while I was watching today, I think the concept of really the base of conflict in Star Wars is kind of outdated when you think about it. It's like good versus evil, which, I mean, in the 70s, that's storytelling. You tell the story of there's a good guy, there's a white hat, and there's a black hat. And so it fits, and especially, 77, they were going for that vibe. But I think whether it was intentional or not, I want to think that it was. I think Mark Hamill in this really shows that it can't be either. I think that was unintentionally the kind of the story of the original trilogy and the prequels, which is it doesn't work if you have to be all good or all bad. And I think that's like, again, I hope it was an intentional move from Mark Hamill where he's like, there's a struggle. He even, have you guys, the whole thing about the force choke, how he like force chokes somebody and like that's
he force chokes the Gamoran guard in the beginning.
That's like a Sith move. So like there's like this like there has to be a balance. And what you're saying about Last Jedi, like I think that's what that story is about. Is just like when you try to be all good, you can't keep that up forever. And so it's only natural that he swung back. And so I think there's something about Mark Hamill, whether it is intentional or not, he does a really nice job at showing the gray area of Luke.
And I think that beautifully segues us into kind of our next topic is a lot of the great themes that are in this movie.
Great.
And, like you said, themes of, there is no right way and a wrong way of doing things. Like there's things you have to navigate yourself in order to find those things. And especially like themes of, just friendship in general and what it means to have human connections and that kind of stuff. What are some kind of, different themes do you think that you pick up from watching Return of the Jedi?
Dude, it's so funny because especially, again, you guys both have, there's an interest in writing, and it's funny because you see these things that every writer usually, that's a huge generalization, but it pops up a lot. The father and son dynamic is hugely popular when writing scripts. And to me, like as somebody who really loves the format of screenwriting, it's just, that's immediately what I was drawn to, is just that kind of dynamic between Luke and Vader. And again, there's something so beautiful about Luke didn't give up.
Yeah.
That theme, that to me, that's goodness. It's not suppressing your emotion, which is a big Jedi thing. And it's not giving into your emotion. It's having faith, I think is really kind of the whole idea of the Force, is about just having faith and like trust your gut. Exactly. But like Luke, through the whole thing, And I think that's actually why it stood out to me. Is that's a typical that's how we see the father-son dynamic a lot in scripts, is that the father is always the one who doesn't give up on the son. That's a stereotype, and it makes for some really compelling storytelling. But in this, it's the son not giving up on the father, and the whole way through, Luke just like isn't giving up. He's saying like, you're gonna join me. Like, I know there's good inside of you. And we see that kind of paralleled later in Last Jedi with Rey and Kylo. And then just the fact that resolution of that arc of Vader saying you were right. Like, it's just something, there's something so human about that connection. You're right. Connecting with your family, and that connection at the end between Luke and Anakin. Take my helmet off. I want to see you with my own eyes. Like,
yeah, that's powerful.
That's just, it is. Oh my gosh. Like, to me, that's, I think probably out of the franchise, that's maybe my favorite moment is that moment, because it is just such a beautiful idea that no matter what you can do, I mean, let's be real. Like, Vader is space Hitler. Like, that's what that's the character. And the fact that Luke is like, I don't care. Like, I don't care that you're this force of evil in our little universe. Like, you're my dad, and I'm not going to give up on you. And
I knew you were once the Jedi, Anakin Skywalker. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I to me, that's the thing that sunk in, the thing that like had teeth and bit into me. And I've thought that for the past couple times I've watched it over the last couple of years, that's just such a beautifully written arc. And it makes me wonder if that's Kasdan or if it's Lucas. I've always kind of wondered.
Well, again, in things like how Star Wars Conquered the Universe, stuff like that, you realize that movies like Empire and Jedi kind of always had the same overall, like, this is what we need to happen and this is how we're getting there. But the points that connected these moments were a lot, they were ever changing, and like even on set they would change stuff. So yeah, that's kind of where that stands. I don't know if it's just a one, like if it's that moment is just a Kasdan thing or a Lucas thing. They kind of have always kept that in a very blurry area. But yeah, I think what you're saying is, I love that moment between Luke and Vader where he wants to see his son with his own eyes for the first time. I mean, because he sees Luke, and I think he sees the future that he could have had with Padme when he sees Luke, and he sees, everything that he has sacrificed. And I think this movie does say a lot about sacrifice, like Luke even sacrificing, like being willing to sacrifice himself for his friends to save the rebellion and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I love the subtlety behind a lot of Vader's lines at the end there, and the way that Luke is able to, I don't want to say manipulate Vader, but the way he's able to convince Vader that he isn't a bad guy. And he there was a point in his life where he was not a bad guy. And I think it took Luke to push him to that point in his life to remember that. But
I like that you bring that up, the whole thing about Padme, because it makes me wonder, and you guys may know the answer to this, I don't. It makes me wonder how much of the story of Anakin Skywalker Lucas had in his back pocket, because one line stood out to me, which I don't know if it was intentional then, but I think it really is a nice full circle moment of, he says, if you take your helmet off, you'll die. And Vader says, there's nothing that can stop that now. Yeah. And that to me stood out as a really beautiful kind of full circle moment of, I think the central conflict of Anakin, one was always Padme, but two, there's this element in the prequels that Anakin is afraid of death. He doesn't want to die. And that's the thing that lures him in initially is Palpatine talks about, he's afraid of his own death. He's afraid of Padme's death.
He's afraid of loss.
Exactly. And so that's, again, we get the Darth Plagueis the Wise. Like, we get that story. And I think that's the moment that he convinces him. And I think maybe that it started this is very much subtext, but it makes me wonder, if this was something Lucas was going for with the broad story. If it started as I can save Padme's life, but then there's this like, once you give into the dark side and once you really fully embrace those human elements, the things that aren't good. I mean, it's just bad. It's again, it's the story of good and bad. Once you kind of embrace the bad, it makes me wonder if he had that I can live forever. And so it's this nice, whether intentional or not, it's this nice moment with Vader where he's accepted, like, I'm going to die. Like, I'm going to die. Nothing can stop that now. And again, I don't know if that was the intention, but that's something I felt that, whether that was the goal or not. And so to me, it doesn't really matter if that was their intention. I felt it. So
definitely that's what's most important. Jackson, what about you? What is kind of some things that thematic wise stuck out to you with this movie?
I'm gonna kind of piggyback off of what the whole kind of conversation is, and I'm gonna continue on about Vader, but I'm going to talk about the scene in Endor when Luke gives himself up, and it's Vader and Luke walking down the bridge to the shuttle, essentially to go to the Emperor. The theme of it is it's never too late. It's never too late. That's kind of Vader's whole shtick, is that the line specifically, "It's too late for me, son." That's Anakin Skywalker. That's who says that line. It is not Darth Vader. It is Vader has consumed him to the point that when Anakin emerges, he's just like, I'm helpless.
And he's so self-loathing, and
he's just, it's heartbreaking of a line to hear. And it's, Luke's response is, then my father really is dead. And it's just like, in that moment, it's so terrifying to know that they'll never be. And there's that weird silence before, and Vader, breaks it by, lighting up the lightsaber, and he's like, you've done this. He deflects it real quick, but you can tell Vader's going through that conflict
you've constructed a new lightsaber.
Lightsaber, impressive.
Your training is complete. Then your training is complete. Is that what you're saying?
But it's just you can tell Vader's been thinking about this, especially since telling Luke. And it's just never give up. Never realize that there's never a too late. There's never there's no other options.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's never too late.
And Vader realizes that, and his response to it is, instead of, stepping in and being like, I'm done, he throws his boss down a pit. But I get that.
And I think
that's the opera aspect of it.
And I think with Luke, it's a lot Luke, for some reason, he's always been like this, but he always wants to find the good in people. And I think that is really important. Yeah, I think that's really important, is find the good. And that is a great lesson to come away with for this movie, is to find the positive in situations and also find the good in people.
Yeah.
No matter what things they've done or bad things they've done, with some exceptions, of course.
And you're really just nailing on what I had said earlier, but in a much more,
it's like a reversed have faith is I think there is no pure good or pure evil. There is no light side or dark side. I think there's good and bad in every situation. And so Luke chooses to, rather than focus on the genocide and the death and the destruction
and the murdering of younglings and
exactly, he says, there's still some good in you. And again, I think that's a theme we see repeated in Last Jedi, because I think it's substantive. Let's take that back. There's
scratch that, reverse it.
Let's take it back. No, there's substance to the concept, and I think there's a lot to explore there. That's a huge concept, and so I think Rian Johnson was smart to go back to that pull from that well.
Yeah, for sure.
He's a smart guy.
Oh man, Rian Johnson is probably in my top 5 favorite filmmakers of all time.
But we could talk Knives Out for hours.
Oh yeah, Knives Out the podcast. Welcome everybody. But
we should do a third spinoff where it's just about Knives Out.
Knives Out 2, anybody? But we're kind of talking themes here, but let's kind of move on to musical themes and some of our favorite musical moments in this movie, because there are so many, and this movie has so many out there musical themes, especially when it comes to, you know, the size noodles and at the end with the whole Ewok celebration. But what are kind of some standout John Williams musical themes in this movie?
I think the last track, the last piece, the celebration, we're seeing all the different planets. It is like John Williams has this gift. This is why he's, you know, John Williams, why he is who he is, where he can find a way to take the emotion expressed in the script and translate it to music so perfectly. Like, I could just rave and rave and rave about John Williams, because like every tune, and I come from a musical background, so I geek out in this a lot. But like the Imperial March, the you know, Luke's theme, Han and Leia's theme, like there's
the Force theme. Oh my god,
the Force theme. Like, but just that last track of just like, what else? If I put the word triumph on screen, what is that gonna sound like? And John Williams is just like, baby, I already got that song made for you. Here it is.
It's like, hey John Williams, what musical theme comes with the word mustard? And then you would hear wow wicky bicky ba ba.
John Williams was just directing with a bottle of mustard.
Oh yeah.
He was putting mustard on.
Get the Heinz mustard
I
out
hate
there.
That. Like all the players. Why is my sheet music in mustard?
He wrote the entire. This is actually a fun fact. He wrote the entire score of Return of the Jedi in mustard. Kind of a fun fact for you guys.
I knew it was coming. I
tried to be serious, but I broke in the middle of saying that. But yeah, I think this movie is full of great musical moments. Mm-hmm.
It's cool to see the resolution, because like, okay, so for a great example, we get Rey's theme established in 7. In 8, we hear it it's like a darker version.
Yeah.
And then in 9, there's that just epic finale version of Rey's theme. Mm-hmm. And obviously that's John Williams, you know? And he does that again here. We hear just different tracks, but the mood has changed. And again, Han and Leia's theme is just something that I think it's maybe franchise wide. It's one of my favorite pieces.
And there's so many things you can do with that theme alone.
Exactly. And he just knows, oh my gosh, I could just talk about him all day. He just knows when to make something dark, bring it to a minor key, make it a little darker, or make it
the calm, like chilling sense of the Emperor's theme, you know, the light Imperial theme to just like the one really high pitched violin doing it, like just unsettling. Yeah.
I've said this before, but I don't think Star Wars would have the commercial success that it does have without Williams themes.
No chance. There's no Star Wars without John Williams. There just isn't.
Yeah.
It's again talking about that opera, that space opera. That's what makes it operatic, is his music. Like the melodrama doesn't work without John Williams. The epic moments just don't work without John Williams. There's no Star Wars without John Williams. It's just I'm interested to see moving forward what if there ever will be a main sequence trilogy again. We were lucky to get that last 3 out of him.
And the themes he was able to bring out in the sequel trilogy is just, oh my god, that man does not miss.
I know he's got the mustard.
Yeah, in this movie, there's so many moments where the music is so simple yet effective. Like when they're burning Vader's body and we just hear the simple na 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 na, and we bring back that Force theme, but we're seeing Vader because we know Vader has turned by now. We're not hearing the Imperial March like we always do when we see Vader. We're not hearing all these dark themes. We're hearing a Jedi theme when we're seeing Vader's body burnt. It's just chef's kiss.
I think one of the probably most classic scenes because of the music is probably the Sarlacc pit.
Yeah.
bum, 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 and everyone's nodding. Yeah, dude, that's so cool.
It just shows you, and this is a whole other discussion, but it just shows you why Star Wars, I just don't know if obviously it operates so well on television and fiction, but to me, like, Star Wars is so linked with cinema because it's a great example of the art of filmmaking, where it's like, it doesn't work without the combination of all these things. And it's
so many things have to come together in the right way in order for something to be effective as Star Wars is. Yeah.
Exactly. And yeah, it's just that's the thing about really any of the John Williams scores for these movies. You could pick a moment out of any of them and say, like, this one's my favorite. And I'd say that makes sense. If someone had the right explanation, I'd say that makes complete sense because he's just the man. He just does not miss.
Yep, that's what I've always said, that John Williams, he can't make something bad.
No.
I've just never been disappointed with his music. There's some people who like didn't like the music of the sequels. I was like, what? Huh?
Ooh.
What were you listening to?
The music of the sequels, Rey's theme specifically, when the marimbas came in, I remember it's so like vivid that the whole experience of 7 just coming out in theaters is so vivid.
Yeah, that was the first one I ever saw in theaters was 7.
I guess me too. Yeah. No, I saw Clone Wars in theaters. I saw the theatrical
release. I did too. Yeah. I didn't realize what it was when I was like, oh, it's animated. That's weird.
But dude, like, the complaints, the criticisms that 7 is a copy paste of 4 are valid. I think there's an argument to be made there. But the thing, I think one of the beauties that sets it apart is Rey's theme. I think there's a huge argument to be made for Rey's theme because he intentionally said, we're so reliant on strings and horns for this theme, let's go marimbas. And so I remember in the theater when her theme came up and it was on a xylophone, I was just like, okay, this is different. This is something I'm not expecting from Star Wars. And it just plays to, we're doing something different. Now, if it didn't stay the whole way through for that movie, it wasn't completely different, but that's one of the differences that I think works really, really well.
And to still capture the same vibe that he had with the original trilogy of the strings and the horns and creating something like Kylo's theme, where it's very reflective yet still original in the sense of just like it evolves the same feelings that we got originally.
He's the man. There's that story of Schindler's List where he was going to do the score for Schindler's List, and Spielberg reached out to him and said, I want you to do the score. And he read the script and he was just like, I don't think there's got to be a better composer that can do this score for you. And apparently Spielberg said, there are, but all of them are dead. So like basically saying like, you're the greatest alive right now. And I agree with that.
Yeah. I think it's every filmmaker's dream to have a John Williams scored film. And, obviously that's not possible, but imagine.
The man needs to take a break. He's been working for 80 years.
Oh, yeah. He has not had a break his entire life.
I know. He's the man. And his son, I was going to say his son is Simba, like the same voice of Simba.
Right. Yep.
That's Joseph.
Kind of moving on. Let's kind of go. We'll go kind of act by act, meaning 3, but kind of starting out with the whole Tatooine opening with the Jabba's palace stuff. Jabba the Hutt is such a groundbreaking character because he's just this big puppet, yet we believe him to be a real living creature. Like, what do you think it is about Jabba the Hutt and like the approach to making him this big puppet? What do you think it is about it that is so lifelike and what makes you so accepting of it?
Dude, he's just so gross, they just like fully went in and just like everything disgusting about a character. At one point, he's going to eat something and it's going to be alive and he's going to take it in his slop trough. Dude, can you imagine being an ILM and whoever comes in, if it was Lucas or whoever, they're just like, yeah, so we want this character. He's basically going to be like a 7-foot slug. And they're just like, oh, cool.
But he's really fat.
He's fat. And he just like, they present the design and they're just like, yeah, we can do that. And he's like, by the way, there's going to be like people next to him, so he has to be actually 7 foot tall, and I want it to be a puppet. So can you imagine? They're just like, how are we going to do this?
Have you seen that diagram of like where people were inside of Jabba? Like there was a guy controlling the mouth, and there was like a guy controlling the torso, and there was like there were people inside of that costume for hours on end, like remote controlling the tail and
so sweaty.
The arms.
So I'm getting claustrophobic just thinking about that.
But the end goal, never in my life did I not think Jabba the Hutt was a real thing. Never did I go like, that didn't really hold up. Still, 20 years later, watching Return of the Jedi, when I see Jabba the Hutt, he's a giant slug. Like it's not a person in a costume.
That's Jabba the Hutt himself.
That's Jabba.
Yeah.
local celebrity Jabba the Hutt.
And the fact that coming up into this movie, in the previous two movies, we always hear his name. The special edition of A New Hope that wasn't supposed to be there, but in the context of the release, we didn't see Jabba until this movie. I think it's just so funny that Han owes his life's worth to a big slug in the desert. Yeah. It's so funny because you expect Jabba to be this big, like, badass gangster smoking a cigar in a big city, and you get a big fat slug.
I know that laugh.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing that's beautiful about Jabba, I think, is it is such a great representation of that side of Star Wars, because we don't see it. That's what the first 40 minutes is about, is that little world of Star Wars, the seedy underbelly, and Jabba is just like the epitome of that. Like, how do we make the most physical representation of this aesthetic that we have presented in the last 2 movies? It's hinted on it, but especially in 4, like how the gross, just like cantina world, who is like the king of that world, and it's just like, how about a gross slug, and they just run with it. And
speaking of the cantina, this is another great way to showcase a bunch of different Star Wars characters and puppets and stuff like that, because we had that in the cantina, and we talked about that in our episode about A New Hope, how the cantina is basically Lucas's way of being able to show off all the different species and monsters and characters that we get in Star Wars. And I think this is another expansion on that, and we get Salacious Crumb, and we get a bunch of Twi'leks, and we get whatever species Max Rebo is.
Elephant person thing.
Hey guys, don't talk down about my boy Max Rebo.
Yeah, Max Rebo.
Did you ever watch the Robot Chicken Star Wars, and it's the Max Rebo album special edition? It's all I'm really not an elephant, I promise.
Dude, Salacious Crumb scared me when I was a child. I did not like him. I did not like him at all. His little like cackle. No, I didn't like that one bit growing up.
That's funny.
I hate it. And you know what? I hate that it's linked so closely to this. It's the laugh. This is so specific. It's the laugh from the Scooby-Doo movie when they come in and the skull is like the little disco ball skull.
Oh my God.
Those two
are
God. It's the same.
I love the like Muppet. I love the Muppet movements where when they laugh, they just kind of shake their head, and it's
oh my God.
That was like prime Muppet era.
Yeah, right.
Yes. Dude, respect to George Lucas. It just shows you his influences, because you think it's funny, because at the end of the day, I think George Lucas is just a dude who wanted to make movies, and somehow he birthed this universe. But it just shows you that he's a guy, and like I'm sure he just liked Muppets, and he was just like, I want to put Muppets in these movies.
Feel like I can do that.
Well, and there was also no other way to do it besides puppets and animatronics. There was no CG back then.
But the fact that like he went to Frank Oz specifically for Yoda, like it shows you like
it's like, don't get Jim on this. I don't want that. He's like, that dude's a jerk.
Well, funnily enough, he originally wanted Jim Henson, and schedules did not work out.
Jim's like, I don't want to hang out with that George Lucas guy. Did you read that script?
That'd be a funny like fictional joke. Is that Jim Henson hated George Lucas and George Lucas hated Jim Henson? It's like not founded at all, but like it's just like they hated each other.
Start a big conspiracy theory.
I was gonna ask, and I don't know. This is such a weird random fact that I don't know why anybody would know this, but would a Dark Crystal, and this be around the same time? Return of the Jedi and Dark Crystal?
Yeah, 80s.
I think so.
Yeah. 80s. I didn't remember if Dark Crystal was late 80s or early 80s.
I think Dark Crystal was like mid 80s.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was like 80s.
Actually, no. 82. Before Return of the Jedi.
I was wrong.
Nice. Okay, so yeah, that's probably the scheduling conflict. Probably had something to do with it.
I'm sure. Yeah. But like I said, there's just so many great things in the Jabba's Palace sequence, and we even get like the Rancor pit, and we get that one Twi'lek girl that gets thrown into there, and we don't really know what the monster itself is, and then Luke gets thrown down there, and we see Luke fight this big Rancor stop motion monster, and that thing looks so good even today. I think stop motion kind of holds up so well.
Agreed. There's such a tangibility about it that CG just doesn't have.
It's a real thing. Like there's a lot of movies today, it's just like it's an actor fighting a video game character, and it's not really believable. And here it's like, holy crap, this is huge.
I know. And the way they filmed the Rancor fight with Luke is so smart, because the contact they make, there's like maybe 2 or 3 shots where you see the full Rancor and Luke in the same frame. And usually, so they had to be using a miniature, but it's, again, they filmed it in such a way, the shots were so specific, and there was a lot of energy to those shots that it never takes you out. It never makes you think that this is a miniature and a full size guy.
Yeah, for sure.
Which, again, just filmmaking wise, it's beautiful. Like, that's so creative and inventive. And that's Star Wars. That's one of the beauties of it.
Yeah. And then we end up getting out to like the Sarlacc pit and the sail barge sequence.
That's another fun song moment, is the sail barge party music.
Yeah.
It's jamming.
Yeah. It's so cool. Again, the music in this movie is just so great. But in that whole sequence, we get this great kind of pirate-esque adventure with Luke and the team. And Luke gets his lightsaber from R2, and it's the first time we see him ignited, and it's green. What was kind of as a kid, he when he ignites the saber and it's green, what is your reaction to that?
Where'd you get that?
Where'd that thing come from?
It would have helped if we got the lightsaber building sequence that was deleted.
No, totally. This is going to sound super, super petty. My favorite color growing up was blue.
Same.
So when I saw the green, I was just like, not a fan.
Like, turn it off, Grandpa. I'm going to bed.
I'll take my popcorn and I'm going to bed.
I'm taking my popcorn with the peanuts in it and my milkshake, and I'm going to bed.
My milkshake, yeah.
A little bit frozen.
Yeah.
There was always some frozen chunks in the milkshake. Anyways, shout out to Mike Johnson.
Shout out.
Thanks, Pawpaw.
Peepaw. Thanks, Peepaw.
Peepaw.
Thanks, Poo Poo. All right, so basically, I think that the whole Luke igniting the green thing, as a kid, I think I liked it a lot, because I think that looking at it, Luke is a powerful Jedi now, and he's basically a Jedi Knight unofficially, because he didn't really complete his training. So I always look at green as like a color of rank and power. Because we see Qui-Gon with the green saber, we see Yoda with the green saber, we see Jedi Masters with green sabers. I just think Kit Fisto, my boy. They did him dirty in the live action prequels. Clone
They
Wars.
did a lot of people dirty.
You got the big
Wars
bug
good, though.
eyes.
Yeah. But I always liked it because I thought that that color kind of signified that you were kind of you were complete. You're a Jedi Knight now. Like you are officially in knighthood. But yeah, I always liked it that this is kind of Luke in his complete form.
Mm-hmm. I think
in his prime.
You make a great point. And it's so funny that you bring that up because I really had never thought about it that way. Just because Star Wars has always been so prevalent, Jedi's always been so prevalent that I had never thought about it. It was just Luke's lightsaber's green because it's green. I didn't really, but it's interesting you bring that up because visually, red is bad and green is good. Like, red stop, green's go. There's this juxtaposition, and it's interesting because red and blue looks good on screen. We know that. But I had never thought about it in a character development way, but that's a very interesting kind of thought of, okay, like let's make him let's make it red versus green. Let's make it stop versus go. Like he's reached that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Full level of, I guess, goodness, because that's a theme a lot, just good versus evil. So I hadn't thought about it that way, but I think you're onto something there.
Jackson, what do you think?
I thought the same thing, but with Luke's Chanel boots.
Dude, the black jumpsuit when he's got the all black jumpsuit,
the fit, the Jedi fit.
Dude, put this boy in the Cure. I mean, come on.
Yep, agreed.
I didn't have a thought. I thought I did, and then I didn't. Never mind.
That's all right. But we're in this moment. We get the Sarlacc pit sequence, and everybody's getting tossed into this big mouth in the desert ground.
Boba Fett,
where? What do you think about how everybody loved Boba Fett from Empire? Everybody's so excited to see what Boba Fett was going to do in Return of the Jedi, and he just gets accidentally tossed into the Sarlacc pit by Han Solo.
I think this is the first example of doing our boy dirty. Like what we're talking about, Kip Fisto. Like I think they did our boy dirty in this one.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
George said, "Leave it to the books," and the fan base said, "Leave it to the books."
Dude, no, I mean, I think the problem, and thankfully they have quelled this with Mando, but somebody can't just be a badass because they look like a badass. Like that just doesn't work. If they're just doing a bit part, but if they need to be in action and they're supposed to be a badass, then you got to make them a badass. I've said badass like 5 times now, but I think
that's pretty badass.
Thank you. But I think Mando really fixed that because I think maybe I don't even know. Maybe the design they didn't realize people were going to be drawn to it. So
I think that's the case. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think again they kind of work backwards. That they, now 30, 40 years later, they realized they had some gold there that they needed to fill in the blanks, kind of what we were talking about. But I think they did him dirty. I think it just buzzed on.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was also, like I say a lot, how I think it comes from the fans' expectations, and if it doesn't live up to your expectations, you're disappointed. I think that there wasn't really much saying that Boba Fett was going to be this big, awesome character. We just all kind of expected that because we liked the way he looked. And then our disappointment is kind of the product of our expectations.
Yeah, dude. It just chalks it up to great character design. You know?
I mean, you look at Captain Phasma and how awesome that was seeing the Force Awakens trailer. And it's going to be so cool. She's going to be so awesome and going to lead all the stormtroopers. She's in it for 5 minutes and then gets, in quotations, tossed in a trash compactor and then is in The Last Jedi again for like 3 more minutes and dies. But I think that's another, example of this. It's not necessarily the story setting up these characters having these big, great moments. It's our expectations of this is a cool character design, so there must be something cool going on.
Yeah.
And when it doesn't meet those expectations, we're disappointed.
I think it's interesting you say that because have you noticed like in the last couple of years, really since Force Awakens, they've really put a focus on making cool Stormtrooper designs.
Yeah.
We haven't really got those cool like antagonist designs. And I think probably it's because just like Stormtroopers we know in our brain are expendable. So, and there also can be, if there's Death Troopers, there can be 20 Death Troopers in the movie. Even if one gets killed, there's going to be 15 more, 20 more, 25, you know? And so I think maybe that's a conscious choice of just like, we're going to put all of our like cool character designs in the Stormtroopers because they're not going to be as let down if somebody just gets killed, you know, 5 minutes in or something.
Yeah, for sure. But, you know, kind of moving on, kind of getting into the middle part of the movie, a lot of the Endor stuff, and you know, we get that cool speeder bike sequence, which is so great. It's some of the best shot, especially for the time. It's just so well shot. Like that green screen that you can tell when they're on the speeder bikes is kind of obvious, but just the way they go about, you know, in the California redwood forests and those huge trees and all the sweeping landscapes of the camera moving around. It's just so well done.
Such a cool, distinct look, you know?
Yeah. What do you kind of gather from, you know, how this action sequence that you would probably, thinking back now, like was probably almost impossible to do back then. What do you kind of gather from sequences like that in this movie and how it kind of broke the ground for filmmaking?
Dude, I think it's what Jackson said. Can you imagine being in a theater and like watching that speeder bike sequence? Like, I'm sure like it was...
I still get an adrenaline rush watching it today, and I think
seen anything like that.
I think it's the fact that there's no music to it as well. Like
you just get the sound design.
It's just the seat. Yeah, it's just the speeder bikes.
No, I think the same. I think also it's a undeniably American spot, which is not. You know, we think of Mos Eisley. That's not somewhere you can find in America. We think of Hoth, you got to go to the Arctic. I think it's very interesting. That's kind of, it's weird. It's such a specific kind of thing, but like, imagine like being in a theater for somebody who like, you know, lives an hour away from the Redwoods and they're just like, hey, that's my thing is in Star Wars.
My backyard.
Yeah, so like I don't know why that thought came when I was watching it, but I think again it just plays to how distinct that look that they, you know, Star Wars is all about choosing these locations that are just almost otherworldly, and I'm sure it was in the early stages of pre-production they were just like, we can't do it anywhere else other than the Redwoods. Like we just have to go to the Redwoods.
We've already got a desert planet. We've already got an ice planet. We've already got a sky planet. What else do we need? Forest planet.
The biome
forest
wheel.
planet.
Come on, we gotta write this script.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that sequence says a lot about Lucas in general because, you know, he's always had that need for speed mentality. Like he used to street race all the time when he was in his teens, and you know, he's especially with movies like American Graffiti and stuff like that. And I think this is kind of his early attempt at like a pod race kind of action sequence.
Agreed. I got that vibe.
Yeah.
100%.
Obviously the technology wasn't there. I think that's another reason why he put the pod race sequence in the Phantom Menace is, you know, because he kind of wanted that Star Wars NASCAR kind of feel. And I think this is his early test at, ooh, I wonder if we could do this in a galaxy far, far away. But yeah, I've just always loved that sequence, and it's always a thrill watching it.
Yeah, and I think what you guys say, I think about how it lacks a score, I think that is a really genius way of bringing us in. So like, rather than us focused on that doesn't look 100% right, we're focused on like, whoa, like all these different kind of alien sounds. It's like a nice, it's I'm sure it was planned in a way that they were just like, we're gonna cut the music so people are kind of, they're thrown off balance immediately.
Just drawnly intent, like a moth in a light with just the sound of the speeder, because it's just different enough, but it's not constant enough that it's.
Ben Burt, man, he's, oh God, I love everything he does. But we're kind of running out of time a little bit here, but let's kind of get into the climax of the film and how important it is that this climax be effective and have emotional weight and all of that kind of stuff. What do you think Why do you think the Vader and Luke fight at the end? Why do you think that holds so much weight for the entire saga? Like, aside from, the whole father-son relationship, why do you think the stakes are so high for that moment?
I think because it was undeniable at this point, Star Wars was gigantic.
Yeah.
But like, even at that point, we're not going to see another Star Wars movie for 20 years. Do we have plan? Is this the end? Like, it feels like this could be the last Star Wars thing we see. And so how do we, if this is the end, if this is the season finale, if the season finale is actually the series finale, how do we make that epic? And I think it's what we talked about earlier, rather than do some crazy choreography, because really it's the choreography is not crazy. There's a lot of conversation. Luke does that one like backflip, but really it just boils down to do you guys know if they like filmed the normal front flip and they just played it backwards? I was thinking about that when I was watching
I think
it.
It's just he's on wires.
Yeah. Okay.
They just yanked him.
Yeah, I was watching it and it was so like smooth that I didn't really even think about it until after it was over.
Yeah,
just like,
it's 100% wires.
But anyways, I think the emotional weight, and like I said, just that kind of animalistic, I'm bearing down on Vader. It holds so much weight because I think emotionally those characters are in the balance. We care more about the characters than the fictional characters than the fictional universe, and so that final scene is what's going to happen to Luke? What's going to happen to Vader? Is he going to be okay? We're not really thinking about the outside. We're thinking about what's happening in that room. And and I think it's powerful. It's impactful. It's all those words.
And I think what makes it so deep is the obvious conflict within Vader, and how he's almost like turning Luke into the Emperor, because he's like, this is kind of what I got to do, but if I don't do this, you'll die and I'll die, and I don't want that. I mean, you're my son. And he's kind of he has the wrong intentions but the right mindset almost, because he almost wants he's just like, Luke, please just comply and we'll find our way through this.
He's
and
like,
then
dude,
maybe we can figure things out.
Like, just kill him. Like, can we get this over with? Like, come on.
Yeah, and because I think low key, Vader doesn't actually want to rule the galaxy with Luke as father and son. Yeah. I think Vader kind of just wants to. I don't know if he wants. I don't think he wants to make things right with Luke per se, but I think he just wants to make sure Luke knows that he isn't all in on the dark side. He isn't all in on the Emperor and being totally Lord of the Emperor. He wants Luke to know that, he was Anakin Skywalker, and he was this, he was the chosen one, and he failed the Force, and he wants Luke to see his mistakes instead of Luke seeing him as this, I think Luke's
failure.
This failure, and actually Luke does end up seeing what Vader wants him to see.
Yeah, and I think it should also not go without saying. I think it's a really beautiful thing that it's a nice running image throughout the movie of the robot arm.
Yeah,
because we see it in the X-wing at the top, how he's putting the glove on. And that shot's very specific. The subject of that shot is we're looking at Luke's robot hand, and then at the end when he cuts Vader's hand off,
that's his turning moment. Yeah,
that's a robot hand under there, and to me that says I'm becoming the same person as my father and as the space Hitler. So I don't want to be that guy, and I think thematically, again, that's just a beautiful thing of just seeing the negative and choosing the positive. Because at the end of the day, I think emotional weight, there's something about us as human beings. We want to connect with people.
Yeah. And
so somebody's emotional well-being really means more to us, I think, at the end of the day than the well-being of, the universe, I guess. And I think that's the beauty of that last sequence is we're really we're worried about how they're feeling, and that's how it should be. That's how a good fight should be.
Yeah. Jackson, what do you think was Vader's main turning point to actually want to turn on the Emperor and, you know, throw him down that big shaft? What do you think was the moment that he snapped and was like, you know what, I have to do this?
It's definitely when the Emperor is shocked, you know, electrocuting Luke, and it's just like, you know, it's the Emperor is taking it upon his hands of, you know, jumping in before Anakin can make a decision about something, and, you know, just taking it for himself. And in that moment, Vader kind of snaps into it, and he's like, if I don't do anything, he'll take my son. He took my love. He'll take my son, and he'll take my daughter that I just found out about 10 minutes ago too. And that's kind of jumping back to what, you know, you were saying about how, you know, it was, it's that switch. It's that, you know, Vader is afraid to kind of make a move because he wants this with his son. He wants to kind of have this kind of like, I guess, like a clean slate. He wants Luke to understand, but he feels trapped because he doesn't know, you know, the mindset's right, the intentions are wrong, and his intentions are still trapped and stuck with Palpatine. And it isn't until that moment that he's like, the option is, I don't know if Vader knows directly that picking up Palpatine while he's shooting lightning is a death sentence, but I also think in that moment Vader is like, anything, like, do anything you can. And his response is
it's a knee-jerk reaction. He's like, well, this is all I know to do. Like,
yeah,
I don't have a lightsaber to, you know, slice him down.
To be the exact thing he needed me to be all of this time, and just to turn it against him.
I think if you wanted to look at it kind of in a critical thinking way, and again, you don't know if this is the intention, but if you look at it in the full picture of the franchise, I think Anakin and Vader could be representative of that thought process of like, there's right and there's wrong, but there's like conflict there because he's trying to justify doing the wrong things for the right reason, right? And so there's conflict, but he doesn't know how to, so he falls into being Darth Vader. And I think what we were talking about earlier, Luke could be viewed as the gray area, like accepting that gray area. And I think if we look at it from that perspective, there's no denying that what Palpatine was doing to Luke in that moment was right. There's no justification. It's wrong. He's not saving his wife. He's not, you know, he's not going to live forever. Palpatine's just hurting an innocent person. And so I think if we look at it from that way, that Anakin only sees, you know, the blacks and the whites, then he knows deep down that that's wrong. And so he chooses to do the right thing. And that's, you know, that's the inner conflict. It's the whole story of his inner conflict.
Yeah. And there's also that conflict of he is basically the only one alive who knows that Vader is his father. And he knows the galaxy is counting on him to basically destroy Vader, destroy the Empire, destroy the Emperor, destroy everybody. So that way they can wipe out the Empire. But Luke is kind of at a crossroads of, well, how screwed up is it if I'm just here murdering my dad? And, you know, that's not the Jedi way. As Anakin always says in the Revenge of the Sith, this isn't the Jedi way. That's not the Jedi way. But on the other hand, I think his emotions get the best of him in that moment too. I mean, like Jake was talking about, how he's just wailing on Vader at the end there, and he ends up cutting off his mechanical arm. I think that's Luke's moment of, oh crap, this maybe isn't the right way to do things. This isn't. Yeah, and I think that moment, and Mark Hamill plays it so powerfully. Like, as soon as that moment happens, it's immediate. His reaction is, oh my god, I'm turning into the one thing I swore I would never become.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. If I believe anything in Mark Hamill's performance in this, it is that moment.
Yeah.
And the moment of like, he's sure You know, like I feel like there is this kind of insecurity about Luke throughout the whole thing of like, again, what we're talking about, is he gonna go to the dark side? Is he gonna stay on the light side? What's gonna happen? Is he gonna die? Is he gonna live? And he even says in that moment, like, I'll never turn
to the dark side. It gets me every time. And he tosses the lightsaber.
I'm a Jedi like my father before me. That's so good.
That's me cheering in the audience.
Good.
Yeah,
so good.
Well, kind of wrapping up here. We're almost out of time. But what do you think after all the celebrations and after the conclusion to this movie? There's about a 30-year gap, and we only know what happens in about 5 of those years. We got a little bit with Aftermath, and then we get some with like The Mandalorian and obviously the sequels. What do you think, kind of after the Battle of Jakku and all that, where do you think the state of the galaxy was and how it came to the first? Because this probably has been answered in comics and books that we haven't read. But what do you think the state of the galaxy was like in that era of in between Jedi and Force Awakens? Because that's not really explored that much anymore.
I think it is wide open. It boils down to Star Wars. Its roots are in, again, Western. How can we take a Western story and look at it through the lens of science fiction? And then obviously there's tons of fantasy elements, but that's where we start.
And samurai films too.
There's some samurais in there,
exactly, the martial arts of the lightsaber. But like, I think that's kind of what we're seeing in Mando, and I just think it leaves such a wide, like a clean slate to let's do Wild Wild West. Like let's if this was like the Wild Wild West, even when the Empire was in control, what's it going to look like when there's nobody in control? What's that world going to look like? And then obviously we see the First Order come out of it in the sequels. But it gives me a little bit of hope that we'll see something explored in those 30 years, because like you said, they're doing a big focus right now on what do they call it? The dark time between Revenge of the Sith and New Hope. We saw it in Jedi Fallen Order. And then obviously High Republic stuff, they're really diving deep into that. But I hope with Mando, that's kind of the start. Let's really see what that state of that universe looks like,
for sure,
because I think it's chaos probably. Everybody's happy at the end, everybody's celebrating, the war is over. Feels very like World War II, somebody snapping a photo of a rebel pilot smooching on a Twi'lek. But I think probably it looks very chaotic between those two timelines,
for sure,
and points in time.
It's funny how this movie kind of leads you to believe that the ending leads the galaxy to peace and justice and everybody lived happily ever after. But
it's like that's it. Like, we did it.
And anybody with common sense kind of knows that wasn't the entire empire on that 1 second Death Star.
Oh no.
Like, there are people out there who like are still they're still under the impression that the empire is,
but a lot of people died on that second Death Star too. A lot of people died on that first one too.
And can we talk about how bad of an idea it was to make a second Death Star? I mean, come on.
An even bigger one that wasn't complete.
Yeah. Anybody assuming that there was peace in that whole 30 years between what we know is just wrong, because there is a lot of sections of the galaxy who are still extremely loyal to the Empire, and we see that a lot.
I think that's a theme that they love to touch on. I think Star Trek, because I have a lot of my heart is in Star Trek. I love Star Wars, obviously, but Star Trek really explores like law in science fiction, and Star Wars focus is lawlessness. And so, I mean, that's just like wide open. There's territory. And again, we're seeing that in Mando, that it's just like, what does it look like when there is no law? We're seeing lawlessness in this
already lawlessness world.
Exactly. But now it's just like, now all bets are off. And again, I want to know what's going on in that timeline. I want to see what's going on in those 30 years.
For sure. Jackson, what about you?
The war never really ends, So I definitely want to see. My biggest thing, especially with these series coming up, I want to know what the first couple years were like for the First Order. Especially with, I want to know how strong of a power they became before they inherited someone like Ben Solo. And, we're able to get like Kylo Ren and the Knights of Ren and Snoke and all that. Is where did that come up from a military power to returning back to kind of joining forces with ancient evil while also kind of being this political evil?
Yeah, especially sorry to cut you off, but if you do read Bloodline, you kind of learn that the Amaxine warriors are kind of the seed of the First Order, and that's kind of where it kind of was brought up with. But anyway, continue. I just wanted
I was just kind of saying, like, it's cool to just, I want to see what, I have a theory that ties in with Thrawn about like the First Order, about like how it builds up. I think Thrawn is responsible for like the starting up of the First Order,
like what we know as the First Order.
I think he is like, because since he was tight with Palpatine, like Palpatine would totally be like, hey, like BT dubs, like if everything hits the fan, like I have some plans for you. And then Thrawn, obviously dips out and is gone for however long.
Plot twist, it's Ezra.
Yeah, right. That'd be they team up. That'd be crazy.
That'd be wild.
Was that, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't that a theory about Snoke that it was Ezra?
There were so many Snoke theories.
There's a lot of different.
there was theories that Snoke is Mace Windu.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that. And they were like, the scar on his head, like it matches where Mace would have gotten hit. Yeah,
that was bought into. It was Palpatine, Palpatine's Force Ghost, and Anakin's dead body. That was like when I was like when it 7 had just come out. It was just like that's
wow. I love WandaVision.
No, I was on the Snokus Plagueis train for a long time.
I was too. I was on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was too. It was Palpatine was Plagueis. There was this whole theory. It broke it down. Palpatine was Plagueis. His Force Ghost went into Anakin's dead body. Oh, dude.
I hope we get some Plagueis, or I hope we get some Plagueis in that Acolyte show.
Yes, agreed.
That would be cool. Or like even a mention.
Did you guys read the Plagueis book?
No, I need to.
Oh man, I will say it's one of my faves.
Is that Dark Apprentice? Is that what that one's called?
No, it's called Darth Plagueis.
Oh, just Darth Plagueis?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I know there's a Sidious book, I think, called Dark Apprentice or something of that caliber. The Plagueis book
got released like a couple months before Disney or Lucasfilm got sold to Disney.
Yeah. It got bogged down. Like nobody really picked it up.
Yeah.
But no, it's a good read. I can't recommend that one enough. That one was one of my favorites when I was in high school.
Well, cool. I think we're just about out of time. I hope you guys enjoyed our unhinged discussion of Return of the Jedi. We kind of hit every facet there is to hit with Return of the Jedi.
For sure.
Jake, where can they find you on all your social media handles, and plug whatever you need to plug?
Yeah, so I mean, listen, if you this open conversation, you can hear it about just really some of the greatest movies ever made every week. You can find it at Nutterpig Prod, P-O-D, or P-R-O-D, on our Instagram. You can find us on Spotify and Apple Music, the Top 500 with Jonathan and Jake. If you want to keep up with me, I keep updates on the show at Jake McGruder 09. And an episode with me coming on in a couple weeks. That's exactly right. I think you may be 2 weeks from now, and we checked out a Bollywood movie, and we had a lot of fun. Jackson, we would love to have you on the show, man.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Come on. You gotta come on. I'll send you the list. You can pick out one.
Oh, absolutely.
Just don't send one. Just don't pick one of the top 400 because it'll be a couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. If you want number 200, you're gonna have to wait a couple of years for that one.
Yeah, that's fair. I get that.
Yeah, something in the next 50.
Well, you can find us on the interwebs, social medias, on Twitter at ImperializedPod, and on Instagram at Through ImperializedPod. And if you want to find us on YouTubes, you can search up Through Imperialized Podcast. Will pop up because we're named after a Star Wars Rebels episode. So if you just search the name, you'll just find reviews of that Rebels episode. But Jackson, where can they find you on your personal socials?
You can find me on Twitter at QuacksandScaleen. That's QUACKSON, and then Scaleen like the triangle. And then you can follow my photography Instagram at Deleen_photography, and Deleen spelled DALEEN. Braydon, what about you?
You can find me on Twitter at Braydon. You can find me on Instagram at braydonleadbetter. And please, it really means a lot to us if you go on our Apple Podcasts and leave that rating, leave that review. It really, really helps out the show. If you don't have Apple Podcasts, please subscribe/follow our Spotify feed and any other podcast feed that we have. It really helps out the show whenever we have followers because it leads to listeners, and that's a good thing. So yeah, and
I give it 5 stars, guys. 5 stars.
Thank you so much. We are humbled, but if you do want to ask us a question and you want to write into the show, we do take questions on all of our social medias. So if you want to @ us, we do take questions and answer them on our Thursday main show, where we talk about news and some random discussions and talk about just all things Star Wars. So that will be that. And next week we will be speaking about the Phantom Menace, the famous Star Wars movie that everybody loves. It's everybody's top 3 Star Wars movies. It'll be great.
Darth Maul!
Listen,
It's just the
before
Darth
I
Maul
go,
podcast next week.
2 things. Number 1, blessed and honored to be on the show. Really, it means a lot to me. I think what you guys are doing is super sick. Number 2, because I won't get to talk on it, obviously, because I won't be on the episode next week. I think it's very interesting. When I was at Celebration, I went to a panel because everybody was celebrating 20th anniversary of Phantom Menace. The theme music at the end of Phantom Menace, the celebration theme, it is the Emperor's theme and an octave up, which is very much playing to the theme.
I saw that today on Twitter.
Of like, it's a victory, but really it's not a victory.
It's a victory for the Emperor.
Exactly. We're celebrating the downfall of our little republic. So I love that little detail, and I actually really love Phantom Menace. So I'm going to be tuning into that episode.
Well, thank you very much. Well, thanks, Jake, so much for hopping on the show and talking Return of the Jedi with us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
We'll definitely have you back sometime. But
good.
If Jackson does not have anything else,
I have nothing.
Thank you, Jackson. We will be back on Thursday with another news episode, and next Saturday we'll be talking Phantom Menace. But until then, may the Force be with you.